All right, moving forward, hearing persons present, please come to the microphone, state your name, address for the record.
My name is Robert Zimmerman. I live at 3 West Main Street, right across the street here. And I'd like to just say a few words about the Pitney Farms proposal. Like my wife, I have tried to remain very neutral on this matter. But I have to admit I'm now tending against the Pitney Committee proposal until more facts and details emerge or are forced out. The key words to me here are facts about the matters like costs, potential liabilities, and some more transparency from certain parties. We do not own land adjacent to the Pitney property, but I can sympathize with the owners of that land because we personally suffered financially when a prior township committee badly mishandled the construction of the firehouse here. It's right across the street from our house, and that grandiosity was totally unnecessary, and it just about halved the value of our property. Additionally, I believe that lessons learned from the Glen Albin property have not been thoroughly digested and understood by the Pitney Farm Committee, and they should be studied and taken seriously. Once again, I think the key ingredients lacking here are more details and greater explanation by the Pitney Farm Committee and greater transparency on the part of certain members of our township committee. Now let me stoop down and pick up what paper I dropped. I would like to quote from the Mendham Township last week, which wrote up the last meeting. And it said that Mr. Ciappatini, Frank, if I may call you, Frank, declined to explain why he voted against the rezoning. That is not transparency. And I'm not a biblical scholar, but I remember the adage from Thessalonians, I think of the New Testament, to avoid the appearance of evil. And I really believe there's no evil here whatsoever. But the appearance of evil is not properly being avoided unless we come clean with everything and make ourselves transparent. So, Mr. Ciappatini or Frank, I would like to call on you to explain why you voted against rezoning the Pitney property, and I think you owe the Mendham Township Committee, Mendham Township residents, that answer.
I'll be very brief, Mr. Zimmerman.
Thank you.
I believe the Observer Tribune got it wrong. If you go to the tape, my response to why I voted was given. So if you please will review the tape, you'll see it. Thank you very much.
And just
You don't know how happy I am to hear that they got it wrong. Thank you.
And thank you. Just a reminder, the meeting minutes for both the open session and the closed session will be available. Do we have a date on that for the last meeting? Any presentation?
Hopefully by next week.
Okay. So that will be on the record, Mr. Zimmerman, the meetings and minutes. So
Thank you. The Mendham Observer Tribune makes many mistakes. This was a bad one.
I can't comment on that.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joe Miranda. I live at 4 Shelton Road. Thank you for hearing me. Very quickly, besides stating the opinion that this project completely is inappropriate for the residential community, I just wanted to speak about some extreme disappointment. As Mr. Zimmerman had stated, our community is really concerned with the lack of transparency in this process. I believe the residents of this town and of the community deserve the courtesy of being told, what is going on and perhaps the reasoning behind it. I mean, it's just very confusing to us to see a 4-1 rezoning vote be completely flipped 3-2 in the other direction, and not have any true explanation of why. There is a rumor out there, whether it's true or not true, that this lease of $20,000 per year, how was it arrived at? And it appears to be significantly below market value, considering the structures on the property which will be used for income. Although very well done, and I'll give them that much, the Friends of Pitney's presentation is basically nothing more than a fantasy. Their key phrases that come up and up are "we anticipate" or "we project," really do not hold water in this type of negotiation. The organization has no defined leadership for the long haul, which really concerns me, and they also have no history or track record. They have grossly underestimated the costs in reviving that property. In fact, their numbers are significantly lower than the numbers that the Township Committee had come up with when they were considering, when you were considering taking on this task of, reviving this project here. We haven't involved a third independent party, which I think would be a good thing at this point, to see we have a low figure, we have a high figure, let's have someone come in and shed some light. As of now, the Friends of Pitney really have no money. Again, they anticipate these amounts. How can the Township Committee, in good faith, lease taxpayers' property with these stipulations? I mean, this is a serious matter. Contrary to the Friends' statement that this is not a burden on the taxpayers, well, it truly is, because there are variables in there that will turn around and really hit the taxpayers quite significantly. In economic times where the Township Committee has cut the budget for the library, the fire department, the rescue squad, and the parade fund, I mean, is it fair or wise to give away all the inherent value of the Pitney property with this seemingly ridiculous type of lease? That is a concern of many people. I just happen to be stating it, although I do agree. 150 years to recoup taxpayer money is just not reasonable. Also, the $40,000 per year projected savings to the township, I think, is a downright fallacy. There are just too many other variables that you can't come up with that figure. Other concerns expressed by the community are, first and foremost, this seems to be a 6-year plus project. Well, what that translates to me is 6 more years of noise, construction equipment, inconvenience to that community. It's a quiet residential zone that has to put up with more nonsense. Friends of Pitney anticipate, again, memberships. How successful has this been with the Frelinghuysen Arboretum? I've spoken to a couple of people, and it surely was not what they had anticipated. So I think it's fair to extrapolate that we might have the same concerns here. The Friends, again, have no marketing plan, which means really no guarantee and no revenue. Fundraising, corporate grants, again, they're anticipated. Now, we haven't even mentioned the restrictions or stipulations that these donors would certainly make in order to give out that money. How will that affect zoning? How will that affect the use? These are really big concerns, especially to me. The township, quite frankly, has been less than a pleasant neighbor since acquiring that property originally. The fence has been in disrepair. The trees are strewn and fallen all over the place, blocking the sidewalk at many times. I myself have gone out with a chainsaw, cut, and moved the rubbish. The trees are untrimmed. The shrubs are the same. The grass is seldom maintained. At this point, there really is no grass. So I guess one of the problems have been solved. Litter is everywhere. I go weekly to pick up bottles, all sorts of debris, just in that little portion on Shelton Road. Sand from the winter and the sanding on the roads, which I know has to be done, but it's a 1/4 inch thick. You have elderly people slipping. I've seen it happen. Back to the snow, it was mentioned last time by myself, there are 6 months where the town doesn't even shovel. You cannot use that sidewalk from the first snowfall to the spring thaw. These are big concerns. When the pool was removed, mud and chunks of cement were literally all over Shelton Road. I know because I drive it every day. I actually damaged my car on one of the pieces. I just don't think that's acceptable. Frankly, the Friends of Pitney would be worse neighbors because although these things will continue to be maintained, they don't have the resources, nor is it in their budget to continue and do it. So as far as not being a burden to the taxpayers, I think it will be, because now the Public Works and Road Department will be called upon to go ahead and clean up this mess. Once you would certainly be getting call after call after call. I mean, in summary, the common denominator, which I feel that the Township Committee has been neglecting, is the effect on this residential neighborhood and the taxpayers. We honestly feel as though we've been dismissed over and over again. I mean, it is common amongst all of us that we'll speak, and that doesn't really matter. So may not be reality, but that's how we feel. Irresponsible management of taxpayers' money, which some people will term it, is a serious thing, which can trigger liabilities to the Township Committee, to the Township residents. I can only say that Mendham Township does not need this uncertainty, nor does it deserve it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you for your time. I'm Michael 6 Shelton, and I support what Joe just stated as my name. The first thing I will say is that I believe that all parties involved probably agree that the township has the master plan. The Pitney Farm property is zoned as a private residential area, right? Is that an accurate statement? Right? And with that kind of a zoning, I hope that we're not going to change that, since I think the township committee here are very kind of care about the master plan. I hope any plan moving forward, right, you can maintain that private residential nature of the neighborhood. Right? So I think that's very important for us. And as a neighbor living in that neighborhood, I'm really against any extensive usage of any property moving forward, because it's kind of changing the environment for the neighbors who have bought properties around that property. That it's not fair for the neighbors to taking on those extensive usage to those neighbors. I think the township committee, most of you have heard of that when we had the farmers market in 2014, right? A lot of neighbors come up here and spoke up, and I hope that history is preserved there too. And secondly, I hope the township committee will pursue all options, right, to care for the well-being of this town, especially financially, because the town does have a lot of debt. How do you care for that? And finding the best options, not one single option, but multiple options, right, to get the best results for the town and the people of the town is very important. Hopefully that's something can be done. And lastly, I do want to actually plead to the friends of Pitney, I think some of them are here today, is that really care for not just what you're trying to do, right? I think it's very noble kind of an intention to preserve the legacy, but then also think on behalf of the neighbors living around that property, right? The sequence of event is that we moved into this neighborhood, right? Understanding that this neighborhood is very quiet residential area, right? We love the neighborhood. But then if you impose something new to us, right, with this extensive usage plan for the Pitney property, it's not fair to the neighbors living here, right? So I'm pleading to the friends of Pitney Farm that think carefully about what you're trying to do, right? Find a way to preserve the legacy, but in the meantime, not impacting the neighbors living in this community. So think very hard. And also I would say too is think for the town too, right? Don't put the township in a position to take on even more liabilities and lose more money, right? Based on your proposal. So really think hard and think how you can approach this in a different way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tassos Konidari, 6 Valentine Road. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. In our previous meetings, I have pointed out the numerous serious deficiencies of the Friends of Pitney plan, the fact that we're considering leasing $4 million of public assets to a group that last time they publicly disclosed their assets, about 4 months ago, they said they had $5,000 in their checking account. Or the incomparable purposes for the use and so forth. All these and many other serious questions still exist, but tonight I will focus on 3 topics as I genuinely care for each one of you. I care for my neighborhood and I care for my town. First, And I know I'm not the only one concerned on this item, and I fear the day when an outside expert will review your process for monetizing this multi-million-dollar public asset, and they will be allowed to account for from a compliance perspective. As only one example, 3 months ago, I think everyone will agree that the Township Committee ran a very methodical and transparent process regarding Pitney, Friends of Pitney, and others. Then one day, one committee member surprises many folks, including 2 of his own colleagues, and makes a lease offer to the Friends of Pitney. That singular event created a domino effect that included, first, 2 Township Committee members tried to prevent Wade by using frivolous objections from sharing his draft financial analysis with the Finance Committee. Many residents were present at this meeting, which was not taped. Number 2, the committee never answered multiple calls for clarity on the decision-making process. Those are on the tape. Number 3, 2 seasoned Township Committee members changed their vote with no change in the facts. The zoning board did not change their minds because there were no new facts, but 2 members did. Number 4, quickly announcing that we are moving into lease negotiations with the Friends of Pitney in the middle of the holidays on December 22nd and on December 29th. We thought those days were behind us. I'm afraid there will be basic questions that have to be answered to ensure proper safeguarding of public assets, such as what benchmarks were used to develop the offer to the Friends of Pitney? What transpired behind the scenes? Who and how came up with that? What criteria were used to make the decision to proceed with lease negotiations? What other alternatives to the Friends of Pitney were considered to monetize our public assets, and so on and so on? My second point is the following. Let's reflect for a second. Not to rehash history, but perhaps to avoid repeating it. 7 years ago, the previous Township Committee did everything in their power to keep this purchase secret. Each one of the Township Committee members lied to us for years regarding their true intentions and hid key information about the property's due diligence process, such as, for example, no structural analysis was done on the buildings, which, of course, if your intent is to demolish them, why waste the money? Even a few of the Friends of Pitney trustees, one just a couple nights ago, publicly said we should have never bought it. Where did all this flawed thinking get us? We spent $4 million, who put our town $2 million in debt, who cut funding of other programs, who managed to divide a wonderful community and neighborhood, and we wasted millions of hours of very smart and dedicated people. We can try to be cute with words like possible negotiations, or dispute what an offer is, or claim we don't know where things may lead. And we can try to take internal satisfaction on moving our personal agendas forward. But people are not stupid or without resources to ensure accountability. Please do not fall in the traps of big egos. Try not to resurrect prior plans whose times have passed as the world has changed. Or allow personal animosities to cloud your thinking and repeat the painful past because we have already paid a big price for it. Finally, we're a small town, and we have actually managed to mishandle many seemingly straightforward issues, such as building a firehouse or managing 2 septic plants. The issues related to entering a lease for the Pitney property dwarfs these projects. And some of the issues include financial due diligence, because so far, not sure what that is. Allowable uses, zoning implications, neighbors who will undoubtedly take action to preserve the quality of life and property values. Finally, there is no end to our town's involvement in policing this agreement. So if your goal is to perpetuate our involvement, go and sign a lease. Well, for the last 7 years, we're trying to put a reasonable end to this thing. It is not too late to be a true leader. Protect the whole neighborhood. Simplify our town. Be fiscally responsible by building a couple homes in the 5 acres, pay down debt, and then allow our garden and recreation clubs that this is what they're for. Use the 7 acres for peaceful activities, which is what open space is supposed to be, not 88 parking spots, 250 cars, doubling the size of a residential driveway in the middle of a residence. Thank you.
Everyone, Madam Clerk, if the speakers, if they have anything written down or want to summarize it, can you get it to the clerk so we make sure you capture it on the record if you haven't already?
That would be great. You can email me.
Cecilia Donato, Ironia Road, beautifully paved section of Ironia Road.
And right to this road, by the way, you mentioned that.
Yes, that looks really, really nice, thank you. And they widened it a little bit too. With regard to the Pitney property, I started thinking about everything I've been involved in the town over the last 6 years. And actually I was asked by Mr. Ciabattini, and well, maybe not Frank at first, but Mrs. Zimmerman, with whom I've had a long-standing friendship, to get involved with TAG, to get involved in helping to change government in this town because of the perceived deficiencies that were occurring at the time. Frank was one of the people who was aggrieved by it. He was a committee member who was being left out of discussions, and he would come to meetings, and it was clear that decisions had already been made in violation of the Sunshine Law. And the only way to change that is to take away the power from the people who are doing that kind of thing. And now we come here, and it appears to a great many people in this town that the same thing is going on again. It's just that now it's different people who are involved in out of township committee meetings and making at least points in discussion that are not being done here. With regard to the Pitney decision that you made to pursue a lease, now Mrs. Zimmerman told me I was not at that last meeting because my daughter graduated that day, summa cum laude from college. Yay! Give her a job, please. But Mrs. Zimmerman called me and told me she had been up here talking with the clerk, and the clerk had said that y'all had approved, pursuing negotiations during executive session. Leaving aside for a moment that I was kind of shocked that she said anything about something that happened during executive session, I was more disturbed by the fact that that decision was made during executive session, because I think if you look at the letter of the law, maybe you're okay, but clearly the spirit of that provision of the law relates to the town purchasing land, the town leasing land from somebody, not leasing to somebody. It all is an acquisition, word used in that section. That's what it's looking at. But when the town is leasing things out to other people, I think that you stand in a totally different position than when you're purchasing things. And I don't think that the second part that the town's position would be adversely affected by public discussion, it can't be met at all. So I'm really kind of shocked that that was done. But even more, I'm kind of shocked that I find myself wondering if TAG is going to get him active again, and wondering if we're going to find ourselves in the same position of trying to get together, maybe in the Zimmerman's house again, to try to get other candidates. Because we just can't keep going back to this same old thing. I'm bitterly disappointed that we are at this position again. And I sincerely hope that you stop and think about that. A $20,000 a year lease that drops to $1,000 and then what goes away, hardly fiscally responsible. I was glad to hear from people who were in attendance, and some of the things I was able to find, that they have gotten Arizona emissions insurance for the Friends of Pitney. I think they're going to need it. I'm very concerned that they haven't even considered the fact that they're going to need liability insurance, and if they don't have it, the town remains liable. There's just so many issues. I sent in a letter. I don't feel that the presentation that was put on the website addressed any of the issues that I raised. I feel that there are other issues that have been raised here, including one that a great many of us feel like we're not being listened to, but 600 people, none of whom are voters in this town, are being listened to. We don't know what the agenda is, but you get two people together in this town, and that's where it goes. That's where the conversation goes. That there's clearly an agenda, and two people are not part of it. We really wish you'd stop doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Dan Williams, Boundary Oak Lane.
Please come up to the mic, please.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt this particular topic. Will there be another hearing persons present, or can I open another topic now?
Go right ahead.
I just want to get my notes here.
There's one at the end of the meeting, and the hearing person's present.
Dan Williams, Boundary Oak Lane. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible, but this was a flip of the coin that I came here tonight, because it's one of those, I don't really know if it matters, but I want to get it on the record. Two topics. One is this Morris Frank Housing Authority, or I guess it's a corporation, and I think that would require some kind of board of directors or something. And I was just wondering, how can you get on that board? How are people selected for that?
John.
I can't speak with absolute authority, but it should be an appointment by this body and to the Morris Frank Housing Authority.
Well, who is in charge of that, Morris Frank? Who would you approach? Because I'm requesting that I would like to be a participant, that maybe a liaison, because I live in affordable housing. I think I have a lot to offer in that area. So I'm just wondering, is it the administrator? I know who the administrator is.
The previous administrator to Ms. Bonanno seemed to more closely control that group, or at least monitor it. So
Who was who?
Mr. Mel.
He was not the administrator for Morris Frank.
No, the administrator of the town is what he's talking
Oh, the administrator of the town.
Yes.
Well, we're talking about two different things.
What are you talking about?
The administrator for Morris Frank Housing. Morris Frank Housing is responsible for arranging sales and
I don't know who that is.
Well, you want a name? It's currently Chris Swanson. Anybody know that name?
But the bylaws must have terms, and perhaps some of these appointees are operating until their successor is appointed. So I'll ask Ms. Bonanno to pull the bylaws on it and give a report to the governing body about who's up. And
this leads to my next question, and I will try to be brief. The administrator is responsible, the administrator of Morris Frank Housing is responsible for the resales. I'm in the process of trying to sell. Circumstances, unfortunate. I've been in Mendham for 1968, since 1968. I went to high school with John. And I'm sorry to give it away.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're dating it.
But I love it here. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to stay here much longer. So as a consequence, I went through the proper channels and I applied to put my unit in Mendham Knolls, which is affordable housing in Mendham, if anybody doesn't know. Pat Zimmerman named the road, Boundary Oak Lane, little trivia. But I put the application in on October 19th, and here it is 2 months later, and I had no documentation for it. There's a protocol in this process, you know, and there's like increments of, say, 10-day periods where they're supposed to do an inspection of my unit to appraise it for value to sell, to resell. And that's supposed to take place within 10 days of the application. That didn't happen. It happened almost 3 weeks later. I was okay with that. I understand she's busy and everything. But since then, there's been no communication. I've sent her emails, letters, phone calls. There's no response. So here we are 2 months into the process, and it's costing me money all the time. And this has been going on for years. I've been involved. I was kind of the acting property manager for Mendham Knolls for 21 years. So I saw all the resales that took place. They kind of went through me, you know, to find out if anybody was in arrears. The attorney or whoever would contact me. I'd say, that's all clear. This is what they have to pay, closing costs, all this kind of thing. So I saw it all for 21 years. And as long as Penny Newell was the administrator, she was the administrator when we bought. And she was fantastic. And there was never a problem. The resales of these units went through without a hitch, no problem at all. But in the past, I'd say the past 5 years, it's been very problematic trying to resell these units, in Mendham Knolls in particular. I don't know about the other two places, the Corners and Brook Race. I don't know what goes on there, but we've had problems. One particular person, it took almost a year to sell their unit, and that's just inexcusable to me. And so she was paying on for 2 properties for a year. And
Dan, we're going to have to do a tape change,
okay.
If you can.
Our new administrator, she has a business card. Can you guys connect on this and we can bring on?
Talking to me?
Yes.
Well, we met last week, right?
Okay, yeah.
So you have my contact information.
Yeah, and we'll get on it and get everything straightened out.
Well, this could affect potentially 38 tax-paying homeowners in the Mendhams. Because anybody could decide to sell, and they're going to go through the same thing. It's just,
Right.
it's got to be fixed. It's a very flawed process. If you look into it, it's very flawed.
Sure.
2 things need to happen. You need to fix your resale price within the affordability controls.
Right.
And advertise and seek to acquire a family or purchaser that meets the affordability requirements.
Exactly.
That's what has to happen.
And they
won't
have
get it done here, but
They have 120 days to do that, to find a qualified buyer. After 120 days lapses, I can put it on the open market and anybody can buy it.
Debbie, you have the full authority of the township committee with Mr. Bill's support to make sure he gets his answer.
Okay, absolutely.
Why don't you have her give us a report at the maybe first or second meeting in January as to the process, what issues remain, and make sure that you're aware of it and you can be here for the meeting, and then she'll have a complete report in public, and that'll resolve.
Thank you very much for your
No,
time.
thank you.
Thank you,
Don't
appreciate it.
apologize for that.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry
Thank you.
I'm here, I'm Janice Beck, I'm here with a few Brook Race neighbors, and we're a little confused about what's going on with Mendham Sewer East and West. Is this the time to question that?
I'll have to defer that since I'm not supposed to be involved.
So, where are you deferring to?
Deputy Mayor.
Ask your question.
Okay, well, we recognize we're a little late to the party, but initially we heard Drakewood had a problem with their sewer plant, but it had nothing to do with Brook Race. And now rumors are starting to change that we owe Drakewood money and therefore we're going to have to pay for part of this. So we know we're confused, we know we're misinformed, and we're here to ask just to find out what the facts are and what is going on. And I see in your resolution it says something about availability of funds, and a certificate was attached, but I didn't see it. And so we're here to understand what's going on.
Okay. The Township Committee has assigned a subcommittee consisting of Mr. Talley and Mrs. Orban Brown to meet with the members of the race community to discuss the sewer system there and whatever issues exist. And I don't know, has that meeting been scheduled?
There's a telephone conversation that a member of the Finance Committee had with your treasurer, your homeowner's treasurer, Mr. Cantwell.
Yes.
And then I had a telephone conversation with him just last week. And he is looking, we provided him and the Homeowners Association, presumably, with audit materials going back to 1996. And specifically, Mendham West audit started in 2001. So there's a history of what exactly has been collected, what has been expended, what has been set aside for capital, what has been expended from capital. So I believe right now he is analyzing it. Our own auditor has put together a spreadsheet. I actually just got it a few hours before this meeting, and so I haven't even looked at it. I don't have any problem whatsoever with sharing it with the people in Mendham West. Whoever wants to take a look at it and take a look at the materials. I understand, I heard earlier today that there are rumors flying around. I think for the moment, I would discount any rumors because they probably have no credibility. I would like to have a meeting, Sam and I, Mr. Tolley and I would like to have a meeting with the Mendham West people. But I think the resolution is going to be very positive. I mean, there will be, I'm sure, a rate increase.
For
But
the
it
township, or for the entire township?
No, a rate increase for both sewer operations. So
Oh.
Mendham East and Mendham West will both have rate increases. But there haven't been any rate increases since, Mr. Tolley, 2000.
07 and 09 and 07. The bottom line is that neither utility, they didn't update these are self-liquidating utilities, which mean the users have to pay the cost. So part of the cost is operation, part is maintaining reserves for repairs, obviously. And Mendham Sewer West is behind the curve dramatically.
We are, well,
There wasn't enough money being charged. The rates should have been increased, they weren't. And that's when we became aware of that this year, because of the change in staffing, we were delayed in acting on it until late in the year.
so the Mendham West sewer system has been undercharged in the past?
Yes, well, in terms of,
Users of that?
well, what appears to have happened is the reserves were used to cover the operating costs. So obviously, the increase should have occurred then. Last year, Mendham Township had to put in $14,000 to pay the costs that were due on Sewer West. There's also a question of the cost of the audit, and that has to be addressed. So what's being charged is insufficient to cover the operating costs, let alone start to rebuild the reserve and repay the town.
So the Mendham West sewer system problems are separate from the Mendham East?
They're separate and distinct.
And do we have any idea yet what our increase will look like?
Well, it passed in a first reading ordinance at the last meeting was a 12.5% increase for the community. It really works out to a very very reasonable amount per household. And I think that we would be happy, Mr. Tully and I would be happy to meet with residents and show them the numbers, because they're not, it sounds scarier than it really is.
Well, it's just that, as I stated earlier, rumors were flying about the two sisters seeing.
So we've tried to schedule meetings, just has not occurred. Unfortunately, the reality is that the actual real dollar increase would probably have to be larger than the 12.5% increase to cover everything. The question is, how quickly can we institute, reasonable charges? And the real dollar amounts are not that significant. You compare, especially if you compare them with what people in Easter pay, which is dramatically larger for other reasons. That's why we wanted to have a meeting, but it's very difficult sometimes to schedule meetings with people, and we're trying to do that. But at the same time, we have to share responsibilities to the community too. So, irrespective of what gets increased or not, we're certainly willing to meet with any or all the residents of Mendham West and discuss in detail. We have provided detailed, as I said, audits. I had one of the members of finance speak with Mr. Campbell at great length, so he understands it. He's also has a financial background, so it made sense to him. You have to kind of dig through the material a little bit, but we wanted to give the raw data. We felt that way it was audited by our auditors, so it was accurate. And
So, Bob Cantwell is your main contact person.
That's our understanding.
That was
where he's
that makes
correct.
sense.
That's fine.
That makes sense. So then we should go to him and then
Yes.
encourage him to maybe set up a date
That would be good.
early next year and
Yes.
invite the Brook Race residents. Okay, thank you.
And
As soon as
for your
possible.
information, on December 29th, this body is going to act on an ordinance that would increase the rates that the Mendham Sewer West charges its consumers, which you are one of. If you would like to attend that meeting, you're certainly welcome.
Okay,
It's Tuesday night, the 29th.
okay, thank you very much.
Good evening, Tara Skurzensky, 4 Byron Court, also in Brook Race. I was here when this was brought up the first time, and there was no notice given to the residents of Brook Race then that there looked to be a substantial increase on the horizon. Now, apparently nobody knew at that point why the increase was being made and on what it was predicated. Is it based on sewer rates? Is it based on run rate? No one was able to explain that. We asked that something go out to residents. It still hasn't happened. And yet, there's going to be an ordinance introduced next week. So that's very curious. I'd like to know right now, if there are audited statements, who was responsible for knowing that this system was underfunded? Who should have known this? There were audits made. To whom did they go? Who looked at the audit?
The previous administrator has notified us during the course of this year that Mendham Sewer West and Mendham Sewer East would be underfunded.
This year. But now you're saying there hasn't been an increase since 2009. So when did it start to become underfunded? Or when did we start to drop our reserve and have our reserve go into operating expenses?
I have
The audit answer that question. Yeah, the numbers are in the audit. And actually, if I recall correctly from my conversation with Mr. Cantwell and from what I viewed this afternoon in brief, because there's a lot of numbers there, the reserve was used in 2013, I'm going to say, for some major repairs of the system, perhaps the leach fields, I don't know. So I don't believe it has been a perpetual problem. I think it is a problem that has occurred as time has gone on. As the contract has been renewed and their prices increase, those increases weren't being passed on to the residents. And in order for us to be able to move it to the point where they do even out, because the whole point is to kind of make it break even. In order to get it there, move it there, we have to be able to send out notices to the residents as of January 1st. Is that correct, Mr. Tully? That's
In order, the way you receive your sewer bills, you know better than I do, it's 4 times a year. In order to do that, we have to have them ready January 1st. In speaking with the tax collector, probably for both increases for both sewer east and west, the first installment will be delayed from February until March 1st to allow for time. The real dollars are not that tremendous, but it's still obviously a large increase. You asked about who's responsible. Obviously, the township committee is responsible. No question about it. We relied on management that did not make us aware of the problem. We're aware of it now, and we're addressing it. And that's the truth. It's not a pleasant truth, but that's the way it is. And it's never nice to know that you're not getting the information you think you're getting. You deserved it, and you didn't get it. And the increases should have occurred earlier, and this now would not have occurred, but that's not the case.
So will this increase, if the numbers are only being reviewed now, but you're looking to do the increase as of January, will the increase also help build up Worcester again in the event that we have something happen as is happening in Drakewick? Are we going to build a reserve, a fulsome reserve?
The increase that I suggest to the committee, which they have not really totally agreed to, would have increased, I believe, I don't have the fact figures in front of me, but I think $70 a quarter to the single family homes, and something in the range of maybe $30 or less to the condos a quarter. What that would have accomplished was to put the association on sound footing in terms of paying the operating cost, repaying last year's audit, paying this year's audit, and beginning to pay back the town. Obviously, with that discretionary money maybe going back to the town, maybe we could build some of that into the reserve as well. But it's going to be a lengthy process. I mean, unless we obviously increase it more. It's a number of homes, times the increase times what's missing. And when we know that the audit's $2,500, roughly speaking, and that the town has put in $14,000, right there you can see, you divide that by the number of homes, you can kind of get a sense of what we're talking about. And we would have been more than happy to have met with people, and I made an effort, it just didn't happen. And I'm not saying that we had a lot of time, and everyone was busy. And Diana has had a little more success reaching out to Mr. Cantwell, but we did provide him with the detail, and we're happy to discuss it. But it's this type of situation which we are addressing, and the percentages are scary, but the real dollars are not that dramatic.
And that's fine, but help me understand, you usually have a percentage that you have to keep, or a dollar amount that you have to keep in reserve. Now, I don't expect you to know off the top of your head what that is for a sewer system, but if we have zero in reserve because we've been using it toward our operating budget, how much is that reserve supposed to be? And how long, at $70 a quarter over 86 houses, is it going to take to refurbish that reserve that should be there currently?
I don't think we have those answers yet.
We certainly know.
Yeah, and yet you're still setting a number.
Well, we're trying to address the issue. Obviously, we could, if we doubled the assessment, we could obviously clearly be a lot closer to having a reserve in place next year. We're not entirely sure that's fair, especially the condo owners who are probably on limited budgets. So we're trying to phase it in. And obviously, it's all subject to final detail, but we are trying to address it. But 12.5% is not going to get us where we have to go. 25% might begin the process to put some money in reserve. Obviously, we don't want to increase, 100% or 50% in 1 year. And yeah, we'd be a lot more comfortable if there was something in the range of $50,000 in the reserve account. It's just not there.
So when will those numbers be available so that the homeowners at least know what was there when it was dissipated, and how much we have to replace based on whatever guidelines are in place?
the numbers are available. And my suggestion would be to reach out to Mr. Cantwell. I will tell you this, it's 36 PDFs. So it's a lot to absorb. Now, there is a spreadsheet that's been put together, and I see no reason not to share that with the residents of Mendham West. That might be a little bit easier to absorb.
I haven't seen, does it have sufficient detail showing?
Well, that's just it.
And the big problem is I had a spreadsheet put together, and people in town, and I can't criticize them, did a nice job, but it didn't have the specificity that we needed to see, where money was flowing in ways it shouldn't have been flowing. That's why you have to look, and yes, there are a lot of PDFs, but there's really only 1 or 2 pages each year, and you start matching those up, you can kind of see the flow of dollars. It's not that sophisticated, and we're more than happy to meet with anybody from, we were trying to go through Mr. Cantwell, but so if the association, if they feel someone else or in addition to him that we should meet with, that's fine. You know, and we're happy to explore that, and, you know, I don't claim to be an expert on sewers, but I can see when there's not enough money being collected, we need to address it. And it should have been addressed before this, but it wasn't, so we're addressing it now. And we're happy to spend time necessary, and certainly if we need to make adjustments down the road, either way, we're certainly willing to do that too. But not paying attention to it, ignoring it now that we're aware of it, would not be appropriate either.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no one else who wishes to
Yeah, I'd like to talk about Pitney Farm, but Chris should probably come back.
Is he there?
Okay,
Name and address.
Bob Lowe, 12 Cooper Road. I'd like to go through a couple things. Don't worry too much, it's large font. Previously, I'd sent a detailed memo to the Township Committee based on the updated Friend of Pitney Farm presentation. And in that memo, I had laid out some key issues around sustainability, suitability, and the financial viability of the plan. I had hoped some of those comments in there, as well as others from the community, would have led to a robust discussion at our last meeting a week ago in terms of doing some sort of serious due diligence on the plan they presented. The plan, again, was presented. The group did a nice job, although, frankly, much of it was a repeat of what we had heard previously. But the question and answer period session, frankly, in my opinion, and from doing this for businesses, was superficial at best. Some of the obvious questions or examples of questions that would have been appropriate to follow up on. There was a comment that they had professionals look at the rentals pricing that they have in there. Logical question is whether those professionals ever actually went in those facilities to see the deplorable condition of those units, and why those rates that were in there are different than what Mendham Township was charging, as well as what the previous Pitney Farm Committee would have suggested. Obvious questions like who would qualify the renter. An important one is the community gardens. Who are those going to be available to? Is it going to be Mendham-only residents, or is it going to be anybody and everybody in there? Same questions for the weddings and any other functions. Originally, this was proposed as a Mendham meeting place, but it awfully feels like its scope is now a New Jersey meeting place. There was no comments about contingency plans, no issues raised about what happens if you don't get the revenues, if you're over budget, or you don't raise the funds. And there was no discussion at all as what contingency plan the township would have in case any of those arose. Simple one was, there was a discussion that 1/3 of the goal of raising money was raised. No one bothered to follow up and say, was that $100,000 or was that $1 million? Was it the goal for the first phase or was it the goal for the third phase? I'm assuming everybody assumed that it was was only $100,000. They talked about the buffer zone. No questions about whether there's any evidence this buffer zone would do anything to mitigate having 86 cars and 250 people leaving at a function at 11 o'clock at night. I think we all know that in that community would have very minimal impact. There was no clear response to the question about all the issues that were raised by the previous Pitney Farm Committee and had been concurred with the Township Committee around asbestos, underground tank, and other items that literally would have run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Outside the condition of 3 of the 4 rental units are just abysmal. Frankly, more analogous to what you would find in West Virginia. What remediation is expected to bring them up to reasonable standards acceptable in Mendham that, as residents locally, we wouldn't have to deal with that. And then, probably most importantly, has any of the supposedly successful examples that they've used faced a similar context of strong local opposition from the surrounding area? And no discussion on any of that. I could go on, but frankly, it looked and sounded like the committee to some extent had already made up its mind on this, and we're mostly going through the motions. The one meaningful question I did think was asked by Mrs. Thomas was whether Friends of Pitney Farm would continue to pursue the plan even with the majority of the local and neighboring Pitney Farm residents objecting. Great question. But that question should really be directed at the Township Committee. As the scope of activities being planned for Pitney Farm become clearer to the local residents, and they begin to learn and think about for the first time the implications
Tenant's graphic. He can
of 86 parking slots, 250 people on the property, and functions running to 11 p.m., and the financial implications to the taxpayers, the already strenuous opposition of the neighborhood will only increase. I admittedly am unclear on the underlying political issues that are there. There must be some of this for this proposal to have reached a serious discussion on a lease before even understanding the zoning and master plan requirements. But the question for the Township Committee, and you guys can relay this to Chris, is would you really pursue this unprecedented, non-viable, subsidized option for Pitney Farm in the face of significant and growing opposition by the majority of residents in the immediate neighboring area? Or will you do the right thing, as Mendham Township has done consistently in its history, and quickly move to a more viable and acceptable solution? Final comment. I'm sure you're already aware, but maybe you're not, but the longer this convoluted and opaque process drags on, the greater disservice you have done or doing to the Friends of Pitney Farm, and critically, you're continuing to increase the potential for lasting animosity between well-intentioned residents on all sides of this issue. Thank you.
Just to put this in perspective,
We'll get the camera on you, Chris.
2 of our officers were involved in a very serious tractor-trailer vehicle accident. They're on their way to Morristown Hospital. We don't think it's critical, but we'll keep it posted. Closing public hearing. Person's present. Does the committee want to come in on comments made during the public hearing?
I think, Mr. Mayor, that the community deserves more dialogue between the committee members before a public vote is taken relative to their specific stance and rationale for why they're just voting the way they feel. I think that's owed to them. I do think that the committee needs to also evaluate in public their opinion of the plan presented by Pitney and the rationale for not considering alternatives. I think those things both need to be handled before deciding on this tape.